Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Race Talks Interdisciplinary Virtual Colloquium Series at Texas A&M University. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Mariana Garriazzo, and today we are welcoming to the series to the extraordinary dancer and choreographer MK Abadoo. But before we introduce our guest speaker for today, let me tell you a little bit more about the talks, and then I will pass the mic to my colleague, Dr. David Dunker, to introduce the speaker and moderate the event. Race Talks is made possible by an Advanced Climate Together grant funded by the College of Liberal Arts, and resonating with many other diversity and inclusion efforts throughout the nation. This colloquium series aims to invigorate campus-wide conversations on anti-racist advocacy through pedagogy, performance, and research. Race Talks is a collaborative project that is made possible by the efforts of 6 university programs, including the African Studies, the Dance Program, Film Studies, Latino and Mexican American Studies Program, Performance Studies, and Religious Studies. We truly have a dream team of staff here in Performance Studies. So my deepest gratitude goes to Myra, Darlene, and Kathy for everything they do to make this happen. As a complement to the Race Talks, we just launched a student research presentation series titled Lightning Talks. A Lightning Talks is a short, to-the-point, 5-minute video presentation. In these short videos, students will have the opportunity to bring their research and unique perspectives to an intersectional campus-wide conversation about race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, sexuality, class, ability, and faith. We invite Texas A&M students at the undergraduate and graduate level to present research, consummated projects, or ideas that have potential for future research. These video submissions are due this coming Monday on March 15, and I will paste here the websites in which you can have more information. The submission instructions, submission forms are right there in the Lightning Talks website. I also pasted there the Race Talks website in which you can learn about upcoming events. We will have another event next Thursday coming up, and the Thursday before, and pretty much every Thursday at 2 p.m. for the rest of the semester. To all joining us on this talk today, I invite you to truly demonstrate the Aggie spirit that sets this community apart. Our core values of excellence, integrity, leadership, and respect inform all of our Race Talks events and interactions. All in attendance to this event today are expected to demonstrate those core values. And now, just a little bit housekeeping before we continue and introduce our guest speaker. I will remind you to please remain on mute today. And if you have questions, you can post those questions on the chat. And then at the very end, we'll have a Q&A section, or throughout the event, we'll have a Q&A section, and we will bring your questions to our guest artist today. Also, I want to share that for the grant reporting purposes, we have developed a short survey available for everyone that is willing to participate. These surveys are super short, only take a few seconds to complete, and we invite everyone in attendance, students, faculty, staff, friends, that would like to complete. Those are completely anonymous and voluntary. So around maybe in an hour or so, I will be posting those surveys for you to complete. And now, without further ado, Dr. Dunker, would you like to proceed introducing our speaker? Hello.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Garriazzo. MK Abadoo's creative work exists at the intersection of dance theater, undoing racism, cultural organizing, and critical education studies. Combining classical American modern and postmodern dance vocabulary neo-traditional Ghanaian movement, and social funk style, Abedi draws from the tradition of Black literature and art that unites past and present in unsparing dialogue. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Dance and Choreography at Virginia Commonwealth University and a lead faculty member in the Racial Equity, Art, and Culture Core of VCU's ISQ, the Institute for Inclusion, Inquiry, and Innovation. She's considered a breakout star of 2018 as a member of Dance Magazine's annual 25 to Watch list of rising stars in the dance field. In 2017, she was honored as a 40 under 40 awardee by Prince George County Social Innovation Fund for her leadership achievement in the arts and commissioned by the JFK's John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts to create a new work for their Millennium Stage season. As a 2016-2017 US Fulbright Fellow, she recently conducted 8 months of intensive creative research at the Noyam African Dance Institute in Dodowa, Ghana, and with the National Dance Company of Ghana, deepening 14 years of collaboration with Ghanaian contemporary dance colleagues. She has performed with internationally renowned dance companies and choreographers, including Gaisel Mason, Liz Lerman, Urban Bushwomen, David Dorfman Dance, and the Dance Exchange. She earned her BFA in dance education with a concentration in modern dance and a minor in strategic advertising from the University of the Arts. She also minored in African Studies as an international student at the University of Ghana and holds an MFA in dance from the University of Maryland. Thank you for joining us, MK Abadoo.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate you, Professor Danko and Professor Gariaso. Thank you. And also thank you to Texas A&M and the Race Talks. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here within your community. And I saw Terrence come off of his video came on earlier. People can feel free as they are willing and able to engage this window or maybe this fourth eye of the camera at any point that you wish. So yes, my name is MK Abadoo. I go by she and they, and I am the child of Regina and Mitchell, the grandchild of Willie B and Ben, and also of Virginia and Dan. I'm the mother of Ella K. Magdalene Abadoo. And I so appreciate you beginning and reminding us of the shared values of this community. That's very meaningful to me because that is, it's a practice of mine as well. And the value around place keeping and place honoring specifically helps me let you know that I am normally or prior to the incredible circumstances that we've all found ourselves in the past year, uh, based out of Powhatan Territory, which has come to be called Richmond, Virginia, where I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University. And due to these continued circumstances right now, I'm based out of Piscataway land, which has come to be called Columbia, Maryland. Um, as Professor Danko so generously shared about a little bit about my past, I'm a choreographer, an educator, and a cultural organizer. And my work happens within an anti-racist creative practice that seeks to value the humanities of all those who engage in it, whether they are deeply steeped in the creative process or they have come to bear witness to it, no matter how we may have been racialized. And I'm going to speak for just a little bit and share about a minute and a half of my work. And then I'm very excited to be in conversation and dialogue with all of you as much as we can in this time we have together. Because it is a blessing that the Earth's resources have really enabled us all to be together in this way, especially far across time zones and lands and all of those things. Um, so I'll start with where I ended around being a cultural organizer. Um, my work exists within a practice of anti-racism. And for me, um, as an organizer, that term really comes, the definition of that term that I utilize was provided to me in my longtime work with an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which are based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And it's an anti-racist, multiracial collective of organizers, educators, and folks dedicated to undoing racism and all forms of oppression. And I'm a trainer with within their Undoing Racism and community organizing workshops and partnerships that they have with people and communities across the United States and the world. And our definition of organizing is really to bring people together for an intended purpose. And culture is a way of life. So for myself as an artist, as um, as a parent, as a community member, um, what my work, what I ask myself in whenever I bring people together, whether that's for a rehearsal, a performance, a Sunday dinner, is what culture am I organizing? What way of life um, is being purposefully reinforced as we gather together? And how am I in relationship to that? How am I reinforcing that way of life or ways of lives? And how may I be challenging it, stretching it, expanding it? And as I don't want to make assumptions about where we're all coming from, but because of the land that we are gathered here today, um, Turtle Island, that some folks, Native folks may name as an original name, or as we've come to be called, the United States of America. Um, we exist within a racialized and race-based context of living, an exchange of culture. And so within my works, I really take that up as a Black person, as a Black woman, as a queer person, uh, to unpack and unravel what it means to rehumanize in the work that I do, because racism dehumanizes everyone who has been racialized, bar none. However, you have come to be assigned your race, or how you must be in relationship with it. It's a relationship with a dehumanizing way of categorizing human beings. And there have been all kinds of strategies, highly creative strategies, that all of us who have been racialized draw upon to stay in touch with our humanities. And many of those strategies are reasons why we're here today. And then many of those strategies are things that we should let go of. And so for me in particular, what I've been engaging in my works and what I'm going to share with you in just a moment is focusing on internalized racial oppression. And this is a multi-generational process of internalizing for people of color um, the sense of disenfranchisement, and for white people, entitlement. And they really work kind of hand in glove. It's what the systems require. And there's work that all of us can do to be in clear understanding and relationship about what's been done to us, how we're being organized. And my work in art making and dance making, particularly around being in direct relationship with undoing internalized racial oppression for people of color, specifically from my perspective as an African American woman, is to create containers of practice and shared exchange in which, because let's be clear, if you're going to have race talks, you're going to encounter discomfort, uncomfortability, things that are going to have you wanting to jump out of your seat, out of your body, um, because that's the whole point of racialization, is to disconnect us from our humanities. So to encounter the truth of that requires a strong shared grounding and a clarity about how we're organizing to do that. And so in the work that I'm going to share, it's called Locs, and it occurs between myself, my collaborator, Miss Judith Bauer, and 25 feet of hair. And in our work together in Locs, and across all of my works, it focuses on the unraveling of this multi-generational process through an intentional intergenerational exchange. And so we do that in a body dialogue with each other. And many times when folks see the work, because also a component uh, of my work and my practice that I engage is to amplify and exaggerate sites of meaning, whether that's a place in the placekeeping practice or a site on the body. And to amplify and exaggerate, often using body extension as a way to hold the exchange that's occurring. And so in this work, there are 25 feet of synthetic hair that we're not going to see me entangle and unravel with, but you are welcome to view this work in its fullness. It was commissioned by the Kennedy Center Local Dance Commissioning Project, their Millennium Stage, and premiered in 2017, and it's available online, as far as I understand, until the end of the internet. So after I show my my excerpt, I'll post that if you would like to see it in its fullness. But that's what I want to share now is the moment that happens before the dance with the Locs, to welcome you into bearing witness to this intergenerational and intra-group body dialogue. So I'm going to shift to sharing that now. So that's just a bit of a taste of what unfolds within the work that I do and how that I do my work. Um, and uh, the collaboration between Miss Judith and myself continues. She and I are actually co-directors and co-choreographers on a work that was commissioned by the Dance Exchange, an organization based out of Tacoma Park, Maryland, um, as a part of their Creative Aging Festival. So we are creating a work together that will premiere on May 15th, that explores sistering across generations. And so that's a little bit about that. And I would love now to, you're already coming into the house. I appreciate those who are welcomed in, feel welcome to join. And then also I will get rid of my hide non-video participant view, because I realized for those, my practice is a call and response practice. And so it's great to know you're in the space. And I know some folks really utilize the reactions on Zoom as I do. And so I'm gonna change it so I can see you in case you are doing that. So I'll pass it to Professor Donko to lead us in our conversation together. Thank you.
The question I have is about, the first question I have is about your work, Octavia's Brood, in which you create a liberatory space to explore the commingling of race, gender, and otherness. And you metaphorically use fabric wrapped up around women's bodies to represent the narratives that have been attached and embodied in Black women through history. Can you tell us a little bit more about your message on that piece, and how was it received? What challenges you faced while producing it? And how did you connect with these narratives at a personal level? And I know there's a series of questions, so I can repeat them, but maybe you can start with telling us more about your message on that piece and how it was received.
Thank you. And I appreciate you speaking to the multi-layered loveliness of that question. Thank you. So Octavia's Brood, Riding the Ox Home, was inspired by Octavia Butler's use of visionary fiction and application of science fiction to really imagine worlds beyond the world that we're in. And uh, a writer and pleasure activist, Adrienne Marie Brown, uh, I attended one of her creative writing workshops at an anti-racist gathering such as this. And she introduced an idea that she and her at the time co-editing partner, Walida Imarisha, um, was a sustaining value of a work that they were assembling called Octavia's Brood, and that all organizing is science fiction. And I love science fiction. And for me, that piece actually was crafted within my graduate studies. And at the time, I had been training with the People's Institute for many years. And I have to say too, my training comes specifically from the partnership of the People's Institute with Urban Bush Women, which it was a dance company based out of Brooklyn, New York, woman-centered, and from an African-American diasporic perspective, really uplifting undertold and underheard stories in their own art making. And they and the People's Institute come together every year for 10 days for Summer Leadership Institute. And I've been attending that institute for about 13 years. So that is where the way that I interweave and braid my anti-racist creative practice really comes from the values of those organizations coming together. And so I can say that, however, even in your own, you can be taught to braid, you can be taught to do something, but at some point you are doing things on your own, right? And so I've learned these ways of being, but when I'm really taking up this work, I was struggling with organizing at that time and what it meant to be an organizer in a classroom or in a dance studio. And to hear this, all organizing is science fiction, it just turned for me that, science fiction, that's a creative act, right? That's a visionary engagement. And so I said, in my work, I'm a creator, I'm a creative. And so this is what I do, and this is what I can do. And it really gave me permission I said, I have this space. I have this kind of theatrical amplified space. What am I going to organize here? And how does it imagine the world in a way that I and those who may share a similar experience or who've born in whatever way that they find themselves in sharing their experience, feel some sense of vulnerability and abandon. And so that's really at the foundation of that work. And in particular, I was really beginning to, not the beginning, but in this work, I was crystallizing my own sense of languaging a clarity about the strategies that we do use as racialized beings, that we've internalized, and how those are in relationship, particularly as a Black person, as a person of color, to some wonderful ways of being that we've created. You know, Black culture was created in response to being racialized and in relationship to being African diasporic folk. And it's a, it, I am proud and honored and feel like I exist very much humbly in from ancestors who keep me clear to this day. And yet also there's an internalized socialization around Blackness that I also have to, that I carry with me. And so that sense of the fabric, in each piece, it seems like my extensions get longer. Locs, it was 25 feet of hair. The fabric was 15 feet. You know what I mean? It just keeps getting longer and longer. But it was connected to the backs of the dancers. And we have kind of harnesses, and they rush out to really run away from, unfortunately, the strategies that we've had to internalize that kind of keep us from actually being able to build together, whether that's as people of color or in multiracial communities. And the experience that I've had, and that work, the audience is on stage with the dancers for the first half of the piece. They come in through the back of the theater. They're all on stage. They're kind of dropped into a different time. And then they're guided to their seats, and then the section with the fabric. And I can say that that section with the fabric, that is what people really speak to, as to be able to see, like to see the brown fabric pull them back, and to know that they're tangling with, that's my daughter and her cousin, showing us how to all be and the joyousness of life no matter what happens. So giving us a little lesson there. I found that that part is particularly resonant, what I've heard from folks in the ability to see, you know, to kind of things that have been invisibilized, that we know are there, to be able to see that. Did that answer at least several of the questions?
Quite a lot.
Okay.
I wanted to note that Dr. Gariazo has put your website on the link to your website on the chat, so folks can see some of this other work that we've been talking about. And also, you know, our Zoom audience is welcome to post questions on the chat as well, so that I now and then I can draw upon their questions as well. You have talked about implicit, I mean, in what you said, you have touched on the question of how you connect with these narratives as a person at a personal level, and also how it was received, you know, the fabric being central to the reception. What challenges you faced while producing it, if any?
You know, this actually is, it really is, it speaks to what it means to be on a growing edge, which is often an agreement that which is an agreement that I offer and require in my own creative practices and in relationship to my work with the People's Institute, an agreement that they require, of being on the growing edge of practice, because which is an uncomfortable place. I don't know if folks are familiar with this term. Many times we may assume that growing, you know, it's good for us, we're growing, but it's a very difficult process. You know, it's like the flowers go up and they bloom and they've grown, but the energy it takes to transform from a seed, you know, to something that's sprouting and then to bloom, it takes a lot of energy, and it is going from a place that did not exist before. And so I would say, in in the ways of reorienting the space, what it means, you know, to have the entire audience on stage, and what that feels like for folks coming to witness who are quite practiced and organized, to have specific expectations around, you know, live performance, and the sense of an exchange and a relationship to entertainment, and the setup of a proscenium, and also too in relationship to how we've been practiced to view Black bodies, gendered Black bodies, and what we expect and how we expect to be entertained or to be in relationship to them. And so in what it means to disrupt that and shift, navigating that with the folks that I may be partnering with to arrange it. And I have to say, it's not necessarily a challenge in which there's resistance, but a growing edge of how do we make it work. And then I would say sometimes a challenge for audiences because it happens in two acts, and each act has two parts. And the second part of the first act, I call it the forest, and it gets rather dark. And I was really I was inspired by the play with light and shadow by a Zimbabwean born and United States based artist, Nora Chipamire, who has a prolific body of work, and the way that she utilizes space and light and darkness. I was very inspired by, she danced with Irving Bushman for many years. We did not work together, but she presented a work at University of Maryland when I was there. And to have the audience in darkness and a sense of darkness can be challenging for folks. What they don't really know is that they see everything, because what's being performed in one side is performed on another side, the whole, so everybody actually does see everything. And then the growing edge around, what do we attach the fabric to? Because it's got to be attached to something. And I've been very grateful to have really wonderful presenting partners. And at University of Maryland, they said it took us a while to get to how we're going to do it. And at some point they said, we're just going to drill into the wall. And I was like, in the theater? And they said, yeah. And they did. And then at Dance Place, a dear creative home and also a presenting partner, they are based out of Washington, D.C. They are created something to just kind of attach it to the wall without having to drill anything. So those being at the growing edge of what it means to build this container.
Good. Thank you. My next question is about Wake Up. And in that work, you reimagine the musical theater aspects of School Days, which is the Spike Lee film. And you do so to build a kind of dialogic platform in which the audience is invited to participate, to take part in the dance. And they're walking on stage and around the dancers and becoming part of the experience. And what was the effect, social and experiential, that you were looking to provoke by temporarily suspending the fourth wall as the imaginary wall between the dancers and the audiences, and creating that sort of participatory moment?
Thank you for that. I don't know about anyone else, but I am dreaming about the days when we can all party together again. We can just, make merry and be very close and just kind of just be very free in that way, because it's healing. It's so healing. And many times too, it's in this space of when you're at complete relaxation that you can make some of the most vulnerable connections possible. And that really is about what Wake Up does. I can say that I grew up watching School Days, the film, over and over and over, and wanting to. They had a specific scene in a salon in which they are really addressing colorism, which is a coping mechanism for being racialized. And so they're doing so in a way that you can kind of amplify it, right? And the song is Good and Bad Hair, and it's brilliant choreography. And the choreographer's name is escaping me. I should do better than that, because I have to always honor, and give credit where credit is due. And so I will look that up at some point and put it in the chat, remind myself. But brilliant choreography. And I just grew up watching this, and I I've always thought it would be so wonderful as a musical. And I still hold out a little bit that I can somehow find 2 degrees of separation to get in front of Mr. Lee and pitch him the idea of this as a musical. But all that to say, I grew up attending predominantly white institutions, educational institutions, and this work took place in a historically Black institution. And what we would try to do is, what does it mean to have a conversation that exists in a liberated zone in a predominantly white institution where it's mixed, what we call mixed company. And often it may be that we need to relax, that we need the grounding of joy to hold us so we can stay connected to our humanities, to have a conversation that needs to be had, and not necessarily across racial lines. You know, the work is people of color having that conversation within themselves, and then a multiracial audience of witnesses, you know, bearing witness to that. And the ability for that to happen, the having the joy right next to that struggle is, I think, what makes us able to happen. The piece starts with everybody. You come in the back, you get your hand stamped. There's a DJ who's a part of the piece. And the first is to, everybody has to dance. They have to do a line dance together. The entire audience, you got a line dance. And then it kind of unravels and builds from there. Did that answer those questions?
Very much so. Thank you.
Okay,
so
great.
I'll take the word you use, mixed company, to frame my next question. Our audiences inevitably are mixed company. And so how do you, through dance and choreography, invite and engage general audiences of these various mixed backgrounds to see, to internalize, and to direct and to interact with narratives that are of Black communities?
Thank you for the question. I wanted to quickly find Mr. Salid's information so I could credit him, as I forgot. Around mixed company, you know, what I've learned in my practice from working with artists, or I have to be honest, I danced with Urban Bushelman for a rather short time, and I have a long tenure as a part of the Summer Leadership Institute. And so have borne witness to many values and aspects of their creative process without always directly working with Jawole. But it, definitely, humbly, my work exists within her teachings and trainings. From Jawole, and also from Liz Lerman, who is a choreographer and educator, and a MacArthur genius and an amazing person, who I trained with as a part of the Dance Exchange in Tacoma Park, Maryland for several years. Hi, Ryan, you can come on in. And Liz has a practice that she calls big story, little story. Mm-hmm. And Jawole and choreographer Blondell Cummings, Diane McIntyre, this practice of what it means for the clarity and the detail that crafting a work in relationship to one's own narrative can provide for the frame of a wider social narrative. And I found that my work speaks to folks the most clearly when I'm very clear about where I come from and where it comes from. And it's not trying to tell other people's story. It's not trying to tell everyone's story. It's being very clear about the story that I may be sharing, or often I work in collaboration and collective, the story of the collective. And the clearer that is, the more likely that those who have a different cultural background can still identify the humanizing values of lived practice that exist between the two. So I would say that's my practice, and that's how I welcome folks into the work, and hope that they can connect to their humanities within it.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that phrase, connecting to our humanities. Yes. 2020 has been an extraordinary year, to say the least. How have you adjusted your creative projects to respond to social injustice narratives that have emerged in this year in particular?
I can say, and I'm going back to, so I can see the folks. Welcome back, Terrence. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. Lovely to see you. Um, uh, First, I can say that I was speaking to Professor Donkor and Professor Gariazo prior to beginning that today I facilitated a bit of a closure ceremony for my students. I teach modern dance technique. Welcome on daily, and just taking a moment to reflect upon how far we've come. And I believe this is the beginning of the end, I hope. And that we are preparing to transition to what comes next. And in doing so, there are ways that we've been stretched, and things that we would like to let go of, and actually things that I would like to carry forward, because a sense of more tangible co-responsibility for collective health is something that I would like to actually carry forward. You know, a sense of, you know, an elder who lives on the other side of the country, you know, what I do when I go to the grocery store can affect, you know, this elder or someone who I'll never meet in my neighborhood. Very feeling that very tangibly, I would like to hold on to that in some sort of a way, in a way that I'm not so much scared, but I'm still feeling responsible and connected. Uh, and so in that regard, I've been rehearsing online, and in especially because Miss Judith, who you all witnessed, is an elder, and I think she took a walk down her street, I think last week for the first time in a year, because she's an elder and because she has some just caring for her own wellness. And so it's a part of our practice to meet online. And I really experienced that it's possible to honor um, our who we are as people, um, in whatever platform we're engaging, um, if we are honoring particularly where we come from, um, ancestors. And I have to say, I also learned from witnessing urban bushwomen's way that they pivoted. They have a wonderful work called Artist Journal, and it takes place on Zoom. And I don't know about y'all, but sometimes maybe you'll feel like this at the end of that, maybe not. I honor your practice, your life practice, but we get to the end of a Zoom call and I'm like, you know, like it's like, okay, it's so, you know, is it over? And I got to the end of their work, Artist Journal, and this was like in maybe March or April. And I just didn't, it was so interesting. We were all just sitting there like this. And then someone put in the chat, we don't want to leave. And it was wonderful. I said, you know, it's possible to connect with, when you're connected to your roots, to your history, when you are honest about the most difficult parts of being a human, when you're connected to that, when it is difficult to be a human, that will ground you in your practice. I can also say that the youth-led organizing from this time to take up justice has inspired and reminded me of who's in charge and who can see clearly what needs to be done, no matter the circumstances. And so that has also just, that's helped me even in my own parenting practice. You know, seeing how the youth-led organizing by Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives, by so many places all over the world, is what is holding systems and institutions accountable now and will continue, and has in many ways. That has affected me very deeply and helps me stay accountable, helps me think of, check in with who I'm accountable to. I can also say, because speaking of youth, I think as I was talking about myself and Miss Judith, I left out the fact that the pieces, it's co-directed and co-choreographed by myself and Miss Judith, and also features my daughter, Ella. So it's the three of us. And she is indeed leading us in the process.
You gave me a twofer because I was going to ask about the pandemic, but you've touched on that in sort of how you've adapted to this new reality. And of course, you're welcome to add to that if you wish to. But I think you touched on that, and also on the on Black Lives Matter and sort of the youth activism and social social justice work that is ongoing. This is somewhat related, but maybe it's specifying the question: how do issues going on right now connect to what you do as an artist and cultural organizer in the general?
Yeah, I think it. What it does is remind me, what I appreciate about this time is the, maybe because we were all plugged in more, but a sense of a clarity of how organizing happens, how movement building is about building a net that works, also a value of the People's Institute, building a net that works, and that we are interconnected whether we like it or not. And it's important to stay as clear as possible about one's capacity and to move into where you called to be moved. And it's been, I can say I've been humbled, I've been inspired, I felt charged up, and also a deepening within and among the communities of justice making and organizing that I'm a part of, how a sense of how this time reinforces the necessary work, and how we are, specifically, how we're going to sustain ourselves to do it.
Oh, thank you. One of the defining things about this Zoom-centered COVID year is the intersection of our, of our work lives with our home lives, if you would. I have a question here that says, how has motherhood impacted your creative work and how you see yourself in the world?
Isn't that the truth? You know, I thank you all for welcoming me into your homes. You know, it's a very private space and I don't take it lightly, you know, and into your ears, for all those who are listening. Thank you very much. I can say that drawing much closer to youth stewardship than I ever was is what mothering has brought. And it's really it's a humbling, everyday, at the growing edge practice. And it's very specifically, my relationship to time within my creative process shifted to where the time is now. if we've been able to get the space together and we've come to rehearse, to explore, this is what we're going to do. And because to go home and to try to do it at home is impossible. So the time is now. And it actually was an invitation into my listening to my intuition really, really more deeply, and responding to that and trusting my practice. You know, I kind of came up working with choreographers and dance companies that the choreographers were brilliant creative directors, and they oftentimes would assemble a company of choreographers, and they may or may not be engaged in an ongoing kind of movement generation transference where they're teaching us phrase work they've generated. And so within that practice, I had to be kind of choreographing. They come into the space, they offer an assignment, a task, something they're exploring, something they want me to explore, and I had to explore it. And it became a practice of really growing my own skills, choreographic skills. And it kind of came together at the same time, being in graduate school, which is when I gave birth to my daughter. And that graduate school in and of itself, the pressure rise, there's no time. And then with the being pregnant and with an infant, it really clarified, I have a practice. And now is the time to engage it. And I'm going to trust what's been cultivated and trust those who've entrusted me with the practices that they've shared. So I would say that very much has been a part of it. And then also someone to show you daily, you know, joy, to you know, help you reconnect to the gift and the blessing of being alive.
Your work is crosses borders, especially thinking about your work in Ghana during your Fulbright and that 14 years of interaction with Noyam and other entities in Ghana. My question is, in both in your art and in your activism, if in your art and your activism, how has this sort of a border transcending experience sort of shaped and influenced your art and your activism?
So I began training in Ghana in when I was in undergraduate school. I studied there for a year, and that I had my dance practice really began in my mother's kitchen. And so had a long experience prior to college of building a foundation of Africanist and diasporic forms. And in undergraduate school, it's a particularly intense time, as all potential undergraduate students can probably speak to with a lot of eloquence right now, and of study. And so in my, what sometimes some might call the most intensive year, which is this kind of third year of practice, when you're also formulating these ideas of where you might culminate your study, I was in Ghana and taking traditional West African Ghanaian technique classes and learning those dances. And so it really became a movement vocabulary home. So very much so distinctly, not always necessarily in the movement you see, but in the way that I approach rhythm. You know, some folks have said, you know, I hear the bell, dun, 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 dun. You know, I can hear the bell. And so some of that, I would say informs my work. And then also too, expanding what it means to be in relationship to being someone of African heritage and of a diasporic community, and to be able to have those exchanges across border, um, that continues to exist at the foundation for my practice as it unfolds. It's a gift of this time, to be able to, um, and a particular privilege of those who are granted access, to be able to engage that sort of border crossing, and something that I don't take for granted and have a sense of responsibility towards, um, what it means to engage that. You know, that's also a practice of being organized, the relationship to borders. And and so in that sense, I ask myself too, what am I engaging here? How am I engaging it? And how does this serve continued humanity of those of us who are in relationship to each other?
Good. Uh, if you were asked what can we as artists and scholars do to educate our community about oppression and systematic racism, what would you say? And I'm asking this also with an eye to the issue of indifference. At least when we
Mm.
have mixed audiences at our events or performances, uh, at least there isn't indifference, there is interest, right? But in general,
Mm.
how do you deal with indifference when to be able to inspire to take action, people to take action in matters that they don't think at all affects them directly?
Well, I mean, first, you know, indifference to no action is actually an action. You
Mm.
know, in systems of shared practice, in which there are dominant ways of being, to take no action is an action towards the dominant way of being. So that's an action. And I can say for myself and my colleagues and the work that we do, the organizing work that we do at Virginia Commonwealth University, and then also in the wider dance field, a clarity about what it means to activate, again, this value and principle of the People's Institute around building a net that works. And they speak to, you know, building a base. And so, what is your base, and how are you in relationship to the history of the place that you're in, both the institution, but also the geographical and cultural history that surrounds it? And how is there an accountable relationship to uh, those who may need to be moved, and those who are actually already moving but need the resources and the connection of an access that the institution may hold. And so uh, those are the ways that we are trying to do our work together. I can say at Virginia Commonwealth University, and then also um, with my colleagues in the dance field. I'm thinking about Paloma McGregor, Marjani Forte, Maria Bauman Morales. Um, and then I have a initiative and collective based out of Washington, D.C. The dance place is their institutional home, called Women Dance Artists of Color, DMV. And it's an opportunity for us to come together. Because often what can happen too is, because we've been socialized to really take care of ourselves and survive in many ways, you know. Um, but in doing so, there's a sense of hustling next to each other, often doing many of the same things. You know, I got to hustle, you know, and there's a sense of competition, or even not. The competition is kind of put on from the outside, but we're hustling, you know, within like a competition that we're not even really want to be a part of, maybe. And so Women Dance Artists of Color, WDAC, DMV, we're seeking to what does it mean for us to pause or slow down and to be in relationship with each other, to realize that our work actually can move forward um, if we are more deeply connected. And we have a shared analysis, you know, of power, uh, of systemic and institutional oppression, shared terms of practice. So in many ways, it might just be sitting together and clarifying, well, what are we trying to move people to do? Do we know, are we sharing languages together that are clear in our organizing?
One last question, and then I just also wanted to note that Dr. Gariazo has put the link to the Race Talk survey on the chat, and I don't know if she may have something more to say about it, but just drawing your attention to this. So, what are the ways to explain to white allies about cultural appropriation when they don't see it that way, and what gives you hope? One question.
I appreciate that, because I'm very hopeful. Some ways to explain. I appreciate, thank you, yes, Yesenia, and please feel free to correct me if I pronounce that. Yes, thank you. It's a wonderful question. Even this term white allyship, I encourage us to, stretch our capacity, because if we've all been racialized, we've all got skin in the game. And so we've all have our humanities that we need to connect to. And it's an important, actually, for white folks to do this work in community with other white folks, and then also in multiracial organizing, right? Because there are this idea of actually being outside of the racialized culture is a specific strategy to uphold it, right? And so the allyship is appreciated. And what I know moves me forward in my own work is a very clear sense of partnership and a sense of how the anti-racist work connects folks to their own humanities. And they're clear about what perhaps how they've been dehumanized by having to carry the tag of whiteness that they may not have asked for. What I can say, that actually is probably the beginning of the conversation, is around what it means to be white. And when did one's family potentially become that, or are they entangling with that now? And the relationship to that. And also to, and I think about with my daughter around describing taking responsibility for harm, and sometimes not understanding how the harm was caused, and yet knowing that its actions have been harmful. And there could be some time before that bridge is fully traversed, that there's the understanding of the harm and the taking responsibility. And it can take some time to get there. But I think it's important to know that sometimes you just have to do that. You have to take responsibility for harm caused, and know that one needs to have some learning that needs to happen around that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Maybe if we can get a quick answer to this, maybe we can take in one more question. So you're part of the Ice Cubed work at, this from Troy Haddon, you're part of the Ice Cubed work at VCU, a transdisciplinary space. As a social scientist, how can we partner better with your discipline to create greater impact on racial equity and justice?
As a social scientist, how can we partner better?
Yes.
I can say that a part of the work of WDAC and within the field is gaining a clarity of how art, so much, particularly dance, there aren't studies to prove it, but you can't dance and not experience a bit of bliss. If you dance, joy will come, period. I'll wait for the study, okay? And that doesn't mean that artists are free from engaging uh, in organizing, cultural organizing that actually supports racism and dominant narratives of practice. And so I think a clarity in what it means, this is discipline specific, what I'm speaking about, that simply because something is joyful doesn't mean that it is the antidote to the dehumanizing and oppressive work that has happened. To dance alone will not solve it. Although I can say the ring shouts, right? Bantiban, cipher, that is strong organizing work. And so it's not to diminish that. But I can say that as an artist in relationship to what the community organizing is within the place that I am, it's important for me to be clear about the history of race and racism, my analysis of power, right? Because sometimes, if a doctor, if you sit in front of a doctor and, where did you, what are your credentials? And they say, I really care about people. That's how I'm credentialed. Would you let them operate on you? Right? I really, really care about your condition, and I think I can do it. And as artists, it's humbling to, because we may care about the social work that needs to be done, the justice work, are we also clear about the analysis of power around why these are organized this way systemically? And sometimes when we're not, we can go into communities and support the harm that's being caused. So I think it's around a shared practice of how, like, the humanizing and liberation capacities of the arts and the form are in relationship to the clarity of social analysis. That is how we can work together to move these things forward. I hope I answered that in a way that's meaningful. And if I may, because I think the last question was around hope, and I know we're all getting towards the sleepy hour or the bewitching hour of the afternoon. And so I appreciate your time, and I'm very grateful for all of you for being here with us today. I have immense hope because I exist, and in relationship to ancestors whose life conditions I cannot fathom. I cannot fathom traversing. And they never imagined me, and I can't imagine what they've experienced, and yet I'm here today. And so how can I not have hope for what is possible? How can I not feel the responsibility? And we all have that, and so that really keeps me going. Is it Naomi Osaka? Is that her last name? Yeah, tennis powerhouse, maybe receiving the baton from Serena Williams when she won, was it the Australian Open? Said, what was in your mind? She said, I thought about my answers, and I thought of my ancestors, and I knew that we could not lose. Reminding us of the work of the Haitian Revolution, right? As I know that's where her family is from. And so that is something that really gives me a sense of hope. When I think about my ancestors, I know that there is hope for a world that we imagine together.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the baton over to Dr. Gariazo to close us.
Thank you so much, Professor Donkor, and thank you so much, Professor Abadoo. It's I have taken notes throughout your talk because your narratives, the images, and your words are so powerful and so inspiring that I'm really hoping that we can all truly internalize and learn and open our hearts and our ears to your wisdom and to everything that you have to offer through your art. And I invite everyone to visit your website at mkabadoo.com because there's such richness in those projects, in those videos. I know that you will really, really enjoy that. And thank you for taking part of the Race Talks this week. And I know we will have you back on April 15, visiting our dance program. And many of our colleagues in dance, I see Chris Bergeron, she is the director of the dance program. They have a super busy week premiering a big production this Friday. So I really appreciate you being here and check that out too. Thank you to everyone in the call today, and it has been a true honor to have you visit us. And Professor Abadoo, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you who let me into your homes and these beautiful spaces and your imaginations, and then to all who are listening. Thank you very much. It's a great honor, and I look forward to staying in connection and in partnership in this important and essential work. Thank you. Be well, take care, and thank you.
Likewise, and let's dance.
Oh, yes, perhaps I can have some music to play us off. Let me see here.
Oh, you
I've
told me
started
something about
saying,
that. Oh no,
I've,
no, that's
I've
great.
started saying, if you want to get me into the Zoom room, you're going to need music, movement, or jokes.
Right.
All right, let's see here.